Hey, I'm going to go ahead and record this now because I don't know how much longer I'll have my phone or whatever, and that's okay as it applies to my journey. We've come to a new. We're working through our own interpretation of self-identity. We have an identified combination of sounds in our noise that we likes for us, and that's okay. It applies to us in our journey as we are working to understand and interpret us. As this applies and relates to my journey, my walk, uh, my path, my purpose, all those things, right? Those aren't for you to worry about, really. Ultimately, it doesn't matter per se as it relates to you and your experience. What does matter to you and your combined experience is, ultimately, your comprehension and application of your understanding of the capacity, willingness, and ability of yourself to be able to leverage and or utilize and or apply um, in your combined and shared life experience the complete and total capacity for observation from any and all originating points within the perimeters of always bearing in mind the destination or goal you have in mind. Begin with the end in mind. Don't begin with the end in mind as a you got to map out the whole plan per se right now and have your whole life figured out, right? And that's impossible. That hurts. It's hard. I've tried it a lot, different ways, different tools, different templates. Doesn't work for me. But in the process of, in the act of, in the action that was taken to work through that exercise as a mental construct and model, that conditioned my brain through repetition over time to be able to have the capacity, willingness, and knowledge to operate in a state of creative energy, creative existence, creative thought in a way that should be more manageable, right? Should be more manageable. When the other teachings were about like the mastermind principle, there were several principles that come from that, right? Several principles. What those principles are and or were, based on my interpretation, my understanding, from my contextual reference points, based on my combined and shared life experiences. Hey Google, how do you identify?
I've got a lot of love for everybody.
Cool. Hey Google, stop. Sorry, I never thought about asking Google that question before, and then figured I might as well, right? Because that's what part of all this thought is about. That's what our big debate about sexuality, gender identity, spirituality, every aspect and all facets of self as we know and understand and comprehend them. Due to the limitations of our capacity for shifting our orientation point of perception, because of that limitation within our own existence by our own creation in a way, we therefore have come to a point where we've kind of put ourselves in our own box, right? Intentionally, unintentionally. Some have, some haven't. Don't know, don't care, doesn't matter as it applies to that thought. It's just a thought, and it can be a thought, and I can leave it there because all I need it to be is a thought that I can pivot another thought off of. If that's true, then also what, right? As a tool, as a model for thought, as a model for thinking. We figured this out. We knew in our heart of hearts, in our genetic code, in our soul, in our spirit, in our minds, whatever you want to call these things that comprise the parts and components of us. And what I'm going to interpret as Yumi, or UME are my letters. U for uni, as in universal, unilateral, and unified, as well as one, right? So uni. A, how shall I put that into words? The whole point of all this is to translate, right? So UAE is a concept. UAE is a construct. I'm sorry, it's UME. It's not. I said I'm sorry. I'm tired too. This is a kind of exhausting process. Let's be real. You me. You me. There's something with A as well, obviously, alpha, omega, and all that stuff. But we'll get to that later. Me. When we say You and me, we are trying in the moment, consciously or subconsciously, attempting to align and check in with ourselves and all facets of ourselves, subconsciously or intentionally. Otherwise, it doesn't matter, as it applies to our use of that tool as a tool for obtaining and validating orientation, point of perspective, and paradigm and platform, etc., and all the related things that go and associate to that I don't have. I'm not sure that I'm supposed to have answers for. That's not my part or role. And if nothing else, from all of this, I should be able to. For me, the good news is my life's going to be better moving forward. Our lives will be better because, regardless of anything, we like the word irregardless, because irregardless, it's not a real word, but as a word, what it means to us, or me, in my use of it, irregardless. As in, I accept all the things of all those things, and regardless of all those things as it relates to, right? Irregardless as a word intuitively feels like it should be in the language. It's not yet. And what is language? We'll talk about that and symbols and all that stuff later on. But as all this relates to the point of this video and quasi-revelation or new interpretation of thought or whatever you want to call it, through whatever language or lexicon or religion or filters or lenses you have to look at any and or all of things, right? Salesforce created this. They had Pardot, and it's like, okay, what's Pardot? That's marketing automation for B2B communications. Cool. What do you mean by that? Well, it's da 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 da. Cool. And then they come up with this other thing through acquisition and M&E, mergers and acquisitions, or M&A rather, M&A. Probably want to look at M&A later. That could be a fun thought or not, and that's okay as it relates to what we're looking to get out of this data. The whole point, people, that I, me, and or we, and or us, and or none of us are really trying to make or not make, really just pose for your consideration, hopefully, in the hopes that we can transfer that energy in the form of a message that can be then received and interpreted for any and or all of you to choose to or not to apply or not apply as it applies or relates to the interoperability, right? The ways in which things work, don't work, directly and or indirectly, and or with each other, groups of each other, and or not at all at the same time. Interoperability. That's a missing piece of vocabulary. It existed as a thought construct, an idea, and people got it, but they implied their understanding of it without giving it a name, without extrapolating, text expanding in their active thoughts as those thoughts related to all aspects and facets of self. So by not providing that voice and identity and agency to facets of selves for all my life, mostly. I mean, I've allowed facets of self to come to surface and or quote unquote take lead or whatever. We've got a lot of words for this throughout history and psychology and stories and literature and fiction and nonfiction, and it all translates over to math too. And I can connect some dots for you there, and or to colors, and we believe that we have an interpretation of showing you the relativity of that to colors, or the relativity of that in our interpretations of that as it applies to teachings and principles and parables or lessons, all oversimplified as one idea or object, that object being data, and understanding that object as data and the interoperability of that data as it relates to any other thing, or doesn't relate to any and all or any other thing. You have to accept that both are possible in order to live in the middle. You have to accept that there is some version of a mega box, meta box, or ultra box, not as a the point and purpose isn't to go study that box. The point is just to accept the idea or concept or construct of that box, and accept it's out there enough to be able to. If I believe that's true, then also what if I could believe this as well? And also, what does that mean? I'd ask that we We turn to computer language, was one of the tools that we created for ourselves for interpretation and study of this in a good and healthy applied way. Math is another great tool that we use for this. Literature and art are also good tools for this creative outlet, based on the orientation points of our brains. Because collectively as a people, it's come to be our belief and understanding and interpretation of our combined and shared life experiences. That is an absolute disclaimer for anything and everything from me moving forward, by the way, for what it's worth, and or what it's not worth. And I don't care, because as it applies to me and my journey, my path, that is how I choose to continue to operate. And I, in a way, have had a sense of having those qualifiers on all the things that I've said throughout life. And throughout my life, I have miscommunicated in so many different ways with so many different people through so many different channels, avenues, tools, vehicles, um, waves, frequencies, whatever, like phone, cell. Like I've used all the 1G, 2G, 5G, 3G, right? UG, MeG, whatever. I used them all. I tried, and I tried um, to work within the perimeters of my interpretations of things as they were. And that disconnect, that dishevelment, that misalignment, if you will, of being able to do that is what causes all the problems. No, sorry, that's the wrong way of thinking. You got to stop doing that. I got to stop doing that. I don't need to tell y'all what to do. We are going to stop choosing to have our default OS code, in a manner of speaking, operate that way, and we're going to choose to identify, accept, acknowledge, and give agency and or more to all facets and or aspects of self and or selves, to the extent that we want to be more open and more receptive of other people. We want to be really there. We want to connect better with other people. We want to have real human interactions. We want to have meaningful interactions. A wise man once taught me, and I didn't understand why he called it that, but it was an MI. MI, me, my, was the acronym pairing of meaningful interaction for the name of the first meeting in a sales process. What a beautiful idea as an idea. And if you frame your mindset or mentality, embarking into that first conversation, defining it through your interpretation of the meaning of that meeting and what it means to all facets of you, you're in a much more amazing and better default starting point, originating point of perspective, paradigm, perception, platform of belief, and all that stuff to help you engage in a better conversation that's going to probably have a higher likelihood of success and outcome. How awesome is that? If you can know and understand and interpret as to be able to apply some of the whatever we want to call collectively, when we all come to the same page and agreement on it, what our interpretation of these things are, and that's okay. We don't have to come to the same page. You know what? We don't have to. All that we have to do, we do have to share a similar point of reference for triangulation and communication. That is the truth. That's the ultimate truth. And some of the missing pieces in what we've done to pursue that, we've built all kinds of models to test it, systems to seek it, and patterns to like scream it at our freaking brains and hearts and souls and minds and spirits and any and all aspects and components of self in a way that um, ultimately hadn't gotten through till I guess now, in a way, at least my interpretation of it. There's obviously going to be a whole lot more that we don't know, and we can't possibly know or possibly fathom or comprehend because we as a people have a limited orientation point of observation, of observation as it pertains and relates to perspective, paradigm, belief, faith, location, and location as that location relates to any or all other things, right? You got to be aware of where you're at. You got to know where you've been and know where you're going, right? We've told ourselves, we're hilarious, by the way. We are such a funny people because when you sit back and you translate things to the codec, like there's a bunch of smartasses throughout history. I tell you what, and I love them, and I, in a way, identify as a smartass as well at times. So, depending on the relative alternative variables for that method of engagement. I had to break down my brain to the most simple constructs of communication, to the most basic form of ideas, with an established and experienced history and training and studies of tools and or tool sets from a variety of sources. I mean, a true variety, a plethora. In that, I and or we and or us and or none of us feel that we may and or may not have come to a sense or not sense of. It's weird to say it that way and think that way, but that's, you have to. In order to get to your complete and total sense of self, your you me, right? My you me, you me. Me. I don't know how I'm going to say that yet. I'm going to sound it out through meditation. It's probably going to sound like because the dots are too dumb and easy at this point. But either which way, we are, we're working through it in our way, and that's okay as it applies to our journey and experience. So we identify, accept, and acknowledge, and realize and give agency of self and or self's thoughts and or ideas as data, to be captured as data, good, bad, or otherwise. We are not going to apply inherently. We're going to work and strive. Let's be honest with ourselves. We're going to work and strive towards not being biased, but more importantly than not being biased, because that's a binary thought. As opposed to that, we will commit to challenging our interpretations as we work to interpret and capture them. And also continually test and challenge those perspectives and paradigms as they relate to new and or different, alternate, varying data points in the grand equation of all things, as to be able to all collectively get to a better and more aligned reference point for interpretation, communication, and communion with one another, in ourselves, in our families, in our clubs, in our schools, in our teachers, in our classes, in our all of our social constructs, right? They're beautiful because we love people. We love ourselves. We love to love ourselves and love other people to love us. And that is not a bad thing. That's in a binary view, that's a great thing, right? Can be. Taking it non-binarily can be a great thing, but also can be bad. Why? If then user changes parameters of engagement and uses the energy associated to love as a force of energy to drive one to do things that are outside of the parameters of operation as it relates to the other people in the combined and shared experience. What? I'll let y'all think on that one for a second. But I had to tear it all down to figure that all out. I did. And so, as of the second, it is what? What is this relative thing called time? It appears to be Sunday, January 23rd, 123 or 2301, depending on your preferred interpretation of calendar, 2022. That means, in this year there are 3 twos. 2 3s, 3 twos. Huh. I don't know, that'll be explored later, that'll be fun. But any which way and a who. Let's go figure this out, everybody. Let's test our subject, me and or this data to test, right? Us and or this data to test. Pass, lose, fail. It won't matter. I'll tell you right now, ahead of time, as a quote unquote, I've done the math kind of thing, right? As a way of saying, the results are going to be inconclusive because that's by design. Because I'm going to state a belief through my perspective, right? And really also our combined perspective. We all have a piece in this. So what's going to happen is exactly for the reason right there. My prefix and thought to help make sure I was in the right frame of mind to try and deliver this. That mental exercise, quote unquote, to play in a mental, quote unquote, sandbox of thought, as a construct of mentality and safe place, quote unquote, as to not derail, get out of parameters, break one's brain, quote unquote. Those tools, those constructs, those ideals I drew from many examples throughout my entire existence, and in that, they became and came to the surface of thought in a way, right? Came to the front of thought in a way, came to thought as it relates to other thoughts. That's more important, right? That's the important distinction. Came to thought as it relates to other thoughts and my application of thoughts and use and application of those thoughts in my shared and combined experience. What does that translate to? That translates to I heard a bunch of shit from a lot of different places, from a lot of different points of view and originating points of view, from all over our world, from all over our history, throughout all time, and even some cool fiction about some possible alternative variations of things, just to stretch the capacity of thought to the extent that, as well as also at the same time establishing well founded parameters of thought. You cannot Do not forget about the sandbox when you're in the cloud, quote unquote, to use analogies of modern business and industry. Got to use the sandbox first, because if you don't put it in the sandbox and you go put it into quote unquote production, you're gonna break shit in a bad way. You could hurt the origin platform, or perceived quote unquote formerly known as central source of truth, because it's not essential. It's a shared and combined source of truth that's relative to all other sources of truth. That's one of the things that we broke. We're getting it figured out. We're close. We're super close. And I see it because I get to talk to super smart, awesome people all the time, every day, right? I love what I get to do. I love talking to people. People are awesome, in my opinion, as it pertains to me and my shared and combined experience. So I had to, I had to crack an earlier BIOS and OS and or other related objects version of myself in order to shift paradigms at such a BIOS core fundamental basic level, like the zeros and ones of my brain. The binary, I had to reprogram at a binary level. Yeah, the literal translation. Holy shit, that's a great analogy. Even better than I thought before. I had to go back to the zeros and ones of my brain and unassociate their misassociation and debug it and reprogram it in a way that allows me to see and connect and interpret the things of all things within things. And we all study and pursue to understand these things in their interoperability as they relate to. Right? The theory of relativity was missing a relative point as intended to pass forward as a message for interpretation, understanding, and application. Or was it, right? Maybe the message was the right way, and that's okay, and we could accept that, and that's okay as a thought, and we can leave it there. And if that's true, then also, as I and or we receive the message, one interpretation we have of it is that it's not. It attempted to be the all-inclusive formula. Unfortunately, it was too macro. It was too meta. That's funny. It was too meta, right? What's too meta? Too meta means like, dude, we can't even play with you up there. Like, there's no freaking way. You got to bring it. I can't relate. It's all relatable, sure, but I can't relate to the fact that it's all relatable. That's ironic. That's a paradox. That makes me uncomfortable. It makes my brain hurt. Shut down. Quit thinking about it. Go think about other things. When we go think about other things, because we stop thinking in the creative and thinking for selves, we tend to default to autopilot. Autopilot in the sense that we obviously have our, for continuing analogy, our BIOS, our operating system, or OS. Maybe OS has something too. I don't know. In terms of letters and sound and resonance and the interoperability of our other spiritual sides of self, right? I think I've come to believe and understand and interpret that we all have a sense, a feel. We've talked about it. We've got all kinds of freaking stories, like tons of stories as examples. Stories as a tool for interpretation and the application of that interpretation of that story as data. If it were true, then also what could that mean? Right? That's what we've just an incalculable number of times we try to tell ourselves this in so many ways. Every freaking thing is some kind of a system or part of systems of systems and or systems, or not a system at all as it relates to other systems, and that's okay. Because the interoperability and relativity of those things as all that relates to, right? So it's a pivot, big idea attached to an anchor, and pivot, big idea attached to a third pivot, big idea, right? And or more, right? We have to understand the parameters of thought as a one and or two and or three and or more. Okay, if that's true, then also what, right? What does that mean as they relate to the interoperability and relativity of those things as they relate to one another and themselves and or to no one at the same time? If you translate and transpose that to other thought constructs, we can have a lot of fun with that. We can have a whole lot of fun. We can learn and see and interpret for the use and application of our interpretation of new reference points of understandings. That's, oh wait, that's not a new idea. We've been doing that forever, right? That's what it's all about. So what am I saying really? There are components of communication today, a true communion communication, the communion part, that is the true in multifaceted to multifaceted in a true and understanding way, not having to loosely associate through sheer and only will and only. See, it's another thing that I believe we messed up on. You have to have also. You don't have to have only. I don't believe. And or also, there may be times you only need belief, and that might be enough to get you through parts of life and carry you through until you get to a point in your life. And maybe all you need through your entire life is belief, and that's enough for you and your journey and experience, and we accept that. And that's great and that's beautiful. And we accept, identify, and acknowledge you for your agency of yourselves to have your own interpretation of your own combined and shared experiences. And that's okay, as that relates to us, because you're going to go live your life in a way. You're going to go experience something as a individual pair combination of entities, right? Um, and also in that you're going to be able to have those experiences. And we talk about the notion of the, like, here's the connecting the dots in the long way, the butterfly effect as a concept, as a notion, as an idea, as a thought construct and model. That's another mental visualization of the one can affect the many, near and far, now and or later, right? I mean, it's a beautiful analogy. And it's right there in nature. Every time it rains, we have the capacity for observation to see and appreciate it for what it is and or what it isn't as it applies to us. So you see it as a ripple effect, and you can take it a lesson that, okay, what did I do today? Today, if there's going to be one example, you want that one example to be good, don't you? What I don't know if I want to get specific with that because I don't want to trap your minds. What if something happened to something else, and also it was perceived that that something else that happened was a decision or logic path of a binary, not necessarily the energy of positive or negative, but a binary as in 0 or 1 path of decisions. And if then also what, right? It's computer programming. It really is. I've only studied programming from the conceptual standpoint and or way too many hours reverse engineering and studying Google Chrome's inspect element for probably like 4 or 5 months in a very unhealthy state of mental state, but still working through and using my tools and people and network and circle of trust and circle of influence and circle of my mastermind principle of people that are better than me than myself in these things, right? So my doctor, my head doctor, my wife, etc. Right? Um, one of the components of self that I've ignored for a long time and haven't been feeding or fulfilling in the traditional quote unquote acceptable ways is spirituality, as I interpret it, and that's been a hard walk and struggle for me. Um, the TLDR on that topic is I've come to know my interpretation of my version of God, and that's okay as it applies to As long as I interpret it in a way that also aligns with your social construct, then you shouldn't have a problem with it, right? That's all that matters. TLDR, then that's all that matters. If that's true, then also what? Well, okay, well let's go into a proverbial. Um, no, that's the wrong word. Don't say that word. Distract, delete, go backspace, whatever, blurt it, bleed it, or don't, so you know that I had to go through the struggle of challenging my thought, right? Um, but take yourself through a mental imagination game of sorts, and imagine a version of, you know, let's just use the easiest visual reference analogy that we all know and can go back and watch again now with maybe new data points of interpretation, and then or could have another interpretation of and or from it, right? It's like when we go to a book that we haven't read for 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, we reread it. We reread it because we have new data, because we have new life experiences, therefore shaping and refining a new perspective of that book. There are books we should probably read like every freaking day and or every freaking year. One of the challenges with books and or stories historically has been that it's become to be our interpretation and/or yeah, it's our interpretation as we want to portray it of the history, combined history of mankind, humankind, people kind, person kind. Yumi, meta, Yumi, essence, all, whatever. I don't know what that. I don't know what it's called yet, but for sake of expressional communication, expressional and holistic communication, how do we want to phrase it? We are going to have to think about that and be responsible with our interpretation and the representation of our interpretation of it. And that kind of goes back to the original part of this, the whole thing, right? Or a facet of the original purpose of this, which is I know and accept and acknowledge, we know and accept and acknowledge, and all of us within collectively and individually accept and acknowledge for our own and or others use or non-use and or application or non-application of any and or all things as or not as data, right? If we qualify those absolute parameters, then we are in a safe place of thought for relatively speaking, as relative, right? That's a horrible joke. It wasn't even intended to be. That was like a what they call quote unquote Floridian slip, which is another cool topic. And I feel that maybe Floridian slips aren't so Floridian as much as they are without knowing the true study of it. Really, our alter egos and or alter selves, the other facets of oneself coming to the front of communication, right? Like my creative brain is at the front of communication right now. And some people don't like talking to me when I'm in like quote unquote hyper creative mode as a quote unquote ADD person. It's challenging at times to keep up, keep pace, understand, interpret. I know I get it, but I've been dealing, quote unquote. I've been testing myself and capacity for communication at an elevated rate of thought almost my entire life. We'll talk about that later too. And as such, we have come to our interpretation of understanding that in addition to every other variable of our life, all contributed to our capacity, willingness, and knowledge to be applied, potentially, if we choose to do so, to this type of an experience. And that's okay as it applies to us in our journey. And the ultimate why for us is, again, really just want to love, be loved, give love, and teach how to love. And all that means, as I understand its meaning, and my understanding of what I'm intending to express. It's a complete and utter shift of all that is self. We need new vocabulary, we need new lexicons and codex. Not new. We need, I pose that we should challenge ourselves to be able to help each other walk towards an interpretation or capacity for interpretation All right, we can't. Nobody can make. You can lead a horse to water. You can make him drink. You can't make anybody freaking believe or think this stuff. Okay, don't even freaking try that. I will state that as an absolute request from us to you, as to not remove your agency. It's a request. I can't make you do that. I accept that, and that's okay. What I can do, what I can control, is this data in the way it's currently captured and or eventually shared and studied by probably my psychologist and or wife and eventually maybe friends, right? And that's okay as that relates to um, all of them having more contextual awareness and visibility and insight to the I, the me, the we, the us, and none of us as it relates to their interoperability and relatability with us. And that's awesome. Because then now, what else does that mean? That means I don't have to lie. Why? Because I realize if I know in my all of alls, that lying manipulates the data in a way that offsets the recipient's ability to interpret what's coming from all facets of self. When we lie, the act of lying has come to be our interpretation. That we to get a lie out, we end up in that lie off shifting our center, and an entire an elongated life experience or experiences combined and shared experiences of lying results in many things that we can see and study and go back and look and research. Some variations of that are taught in what looks like the movie Liar Liar with Jim Carrey, right? Jim Carrey did a lot of good things. He and his team and his people and those that are familiar with his versions of creative genius, right? He had to, in a way, break himself to travel to a state of what you could call perceived travel. But I don't know what his lexicon was. I don't know what his contextual reference points were to interpret as he was traveling. So what what data could he extrapolate as best he could, as he was able, and bring back from travel in a way as to help to translate, communicate, share new and or alternate data points to hopefully also share with us all different provide us with the opportunity to have different orientation points of perspective, paradigm, and platform, and any other related things to that, right? Um, um, Sometimes when you're in it and you just do it, it feels good. I remember as a kid at church and praying and song and praise. Song and praise was my favorite things. I love to sing. I love to dance. I love to shout. I'm loud. I'm typically perceived as extroverted. Those that know me know that that's uh, incredibly true. And also, I remember those things and feelings, right? So when I stopped going to church or some version of it, I stopped feeding in those ways components of self, nourishing components of self. We have to take care of all facets of self. I know I got to take care of my body. I obviously know I got to take care of my mind. In a way, we all have a sense that we should take care of our soul, spirit, essence, chi, whatever your interpretation of it is, and or isn't, and or what all it is, or is it related to for you and your journey and experiences as an entity or entities. It's hard to think that way, and when you get in the when you get in like a routine, a subroutine of subroutine of thought, that's also part of the danger, the risk, the scariness, as that when you're operating in like subroutine levels, and we know this from programming, right? Be very careful operating on the BIOS because you can break the whole freaking computer. Duh. And also, that's an analogy for working on oneself. Genius. Oh, but we know that already. But do we? Have we really looked at and asked ourselves the what if we were to apply our interpretations of these studies and or data extrapolated from studies of the computer as a whole and or all its parts as individuals and or its parts within parts and or systems within systems as it relates to memory systems, power systems, data transfer systems, data entry systems, data capture systems, data projection systems, right? Like if you think about each and every component of the computer and all facets of self through all the windows that are there, one could not too difficultly or challengingly, right? Here's an idea. What if the computer became to be an understood model to understand the interoperability of oneself and oneself's ability to interoperate with any or all other things. If that were true, then also the computer then became one interpretation of that perspective. So we had, the computer. Cool, great. I don't know exactly the story, and this will all come to light, over time in a way, right? Well, other people have and or will refresh or bring back up speculations of, because there's nothing new under the sun, because literally everything's a system within a system in a system, as those systems relate to other systems, and the interoperability of the systems within systems as like a max formula, right? A max equation for comprehension, understanding, and application of that understanding as it applies to our shared and combined life experience. Um, um, anyway, there's a lot. We gotta get. It's like well, let's be careful with analogies here. My first attempt at an analogy, my first thought was it's kind of like a light switch turned on for me, and I want to carry that to my family or friends or share it just myself. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine, right? Um, we've told ourselves through so many analogies throughout history. Amazing grace, how sweet thou sound. Amazing grace, how sweet thou sound. That saved a wretch like me. Identifying and acknowledging that one is in and of themselves dual, both capable of the capacity for willingness and knowledge of how to commits, interpreted sinful acts and or not, right? The good and or evil component, the duality of self. What if you took away good and or evil and it was positive or negative? Can't do that because we still associate positive, negative, good or evil. So what if it was, we were in relative comparisons, insert new variables. What if it was, instead of good and evil, it was potatoes and also a ball, right? And then when you picture those two objects in your mind's eye, so to speak, you just think about how those two things could and or would interact. Should they? Would you want them to? Right? Like we think about the if, ands, or buts of it all, the who, what, where, why, and how, the who, what, where, when, why, and how as it relates to, and all these thoughts they become like a construct to say, if this, then also this, right? And this, and accept that as a version of a truth, and we string a thought together, right? We just string a thought together. And then one of the challenges that we've always had, is as a user, right? As a user of information, as to apply it to my personal and shared and combined life experience, the challenge as a user has been historically, and or for me and myself, and or no one, is the validity or trust that's in that freaking data. Oh man, trust and validity in data? That's not a problem, is it? Is it? In business, we have a very, very, very honest, open, painful, accepted relationship with data. In business, we accept and all know, on average, somewhere in a range of X to X percent of data is bad. That means it's not good. Not that it wasn't ever good. Not that in and of itself it's always misspelt or mistyped. And if you look at data and you look at communication, let's just look at several facets of communication real fast. Tempo, timing, wind, force, breathe, sound, noise, pitch, tone, vibration, volume, intent, impact, message, data. Right? When I went through the mental exercise of assessing what communications were, they were the data component plus the energy to transfer data. We use a lot of things to transfer energy or energies, right? Energy isn't one, it can be many. In that, there can be power to as an energy, power as an energy to power my house, and also water as a resource to water source my house, and also, right, that you just think about the systems and the systems and systems and how they interoperate. All those are part of the whole, and together I have this house I could sell for a sum, right, and or not. That is our choice and agency. We have to acknowledge and accept and give agency to all aspects of everything and how they interoperate. I know it feels like I'm talking in circles. In a way I am, and also in a way I'm not. It depends on where you're at in your observation point as you are working to interpret and perceive me and or us and or I and or not at all. Acceptance, acknowledgement, agency, even an admiration, an appreciation, if you will. It's just, there's so many different ways that objects can interact with other objects, and it's something that I've come to learn, know, and understand in my works at work, in my various jobs, various careers. We're gonna do this. We're gonna go. we're gonna go outside for a second. We should communicate that with our wife first. She's gonna be uncomfortable. It's gonna be awkward. How can we? Let's set up a parameter, right? The parameters, the rules. Let's test some rules as parameters, not rules as a binary yes no, because that's bullshit. We got about 45 minutes. Ah! We got about 45 minutes. May I please do a lap around the neighborhood, not talk with you? I want to walk around the neighborhood and see nature.
What?
Nature, outside.
You want to be outside?
Just a lap and left. I will not leave the neighborhood.
Is it like, are you going to get lost in the body again?
No. So it's a loop. It's a safe loop. I can get lost in thought on the loop, and it's okay. To the extent that the loop ends on the back of the driveway, and I have to come back and re-engage in this circle.
Do you feel like you need that?
I would like it right now. I would like it right now. Please.
You think it'll have a positive effect on?
Total overall no. I love it. Thank you. Okay.
I'll be back at
Thank you. And so, speaking of like yin and yangs and synergy and balance, my wife is freaking amazing. Balance. The way in which mom and dad interoperate and balance each other out and help each other and test and challenge each other and keep each other, whole and apart. I used to interpret a lot of things the wrong way. One interpretation of which was relationships and the dichotomy of relationships and the interoperability of relationships in a way that, what? So many whats. And we have lots of specialists out there, a lot of experts. A lot of experts know, in a way, right? In terms of they know enough as to be able to apply those knowledge and teachings as forms of templates for us to attempt to get back into quote unquote a version of sync. I don't know that sync is the right word. Sync as a inflection point. Is that what I'm pursuing there in thought? I don't know. Not yet, but that's okay. As it applies to my journey, I can go explore that later. I captured it as a data point, working within the parameters of thought constructs and models and paradigm, as to be able to keep working on the work. And essentially, that's the super freaking short version that we all have of all of it. So anyway, back to the point, because I'm kind of losing traction on your ability and their willingness to hang out with me and or us. So, I mean, it's all there, right? It's all there. Sorry, not sorry. You're welcome, and I'm sorry. And you're also welcome again. As that relates to our abilities to understand and comprehend, in the pursuit of application of those understandings, to go back and apply them to our systems of lives and existence, so that we can have a purposeful, meaningful, fun-filled, enjoyable life. The meaning of life is to experience life in a way, as it applies to you, if you can come to interpret it that way. The meaning of life is defined by the user. The user and user's experience is what defines the parameters for what that experience is going to be and or how it becomes interpreted, right? And as a user, we can use and reference any and all combinations of referenceable libraries and archives of data through any iteration of its imagination and invention and creation throughout history, which has been beautiful, mind you. But as a user, that choice to integrate with, quote unquote, in a way, integrate as into open oneself up to be accepting and receiving of, also giving to, while maybe doing nothing with, a connection point to any and all other things. As that relates to, and or doesn't relate to, and or could relate to, or may have related to, any and all other things that all ever was, ever is, and or ever will be, and or ever won't be. Wow. That makes your brain hurt. Why? Because a lot of us can't comprehend for the use and application of understanding. We can take it as an idea. We can see the words. The words are words. Duh, no brainer. That makes sense. What's lost in the translation of the data documentation process historically, not absolutely, but a lot of times, is the encapsulation of all that was intended with that. And we thought, what do they mean by that? Maybe it was the meaning of things, right? So it's the word. Okay, I got the word. What's that word mean? Okay, we got that. And then we also, over time, began to document and interpret the importance and significance of the origin of language, right? I've really always loved language, like since I was a kid. I don't exactly know why, but I do at the same time, in a sense that I'm coming to interpret, know, understand, believe, accept, acknowledge, identify with a belief that, or a cluster of beliefs and or their related objects that, maybe there's a version of what you might call God, or what you might call Allah, or what y'all might call Zeus, or what y'all might call tree, or ball, or blue, or right? It doesn't matter. What matters is the combination of thought, of an idea, as a concept, as a construct, as an object, as that object relates and or doesn't relate to any and all other things, as that notion, ... And you have to accept that there's a ... You have to accept that there's more, and that's okay as it applies to, I don't need to know the more, because I can take an interpretation I could take my interpretation of that combined data, and still, regardless of it being true or factual data or not, beyond a shadow of any doubt, know and believe and have faith and fortitude and satisfaction and happiness and glee and purpose and fulfillment and acceptance, and just a complete sense of it's all okay, right? What have we been saying when we say it's all okay? In a way, we use it's all okay as maybe a reminder to others, right? it's all okay, or all going to be okay, as a way to, um, it's all okay or going to be okay as a way to kind of like, as a mental modeling exercise, right? It's all going to be okay, right? I've said a version of it a lot throughout all these exercises. That's all okay as it relates to our combined and shared experience. So that's all right. I will apologize, accept and acknowledge that I just had a fun, creative series of thoughts that played out, and that's okay as it relates to my experience, and it's not okay at the same time as it relates to my attempts to communicate with future me, future us, to you, or you, or you, or you, or y'all, or them, or they. And I like y'all too. I'm going to go ahead and make a motion to submit the notion of y'all as an inclusivity construct of communication, and I like it. I'm also admittedly biased based on my personal and or our combined shared life experiences as that relates to, I'm a Georgia boy, or I identify as one because that's where I feel like I'm from, quote unquote, as that relates to my physical plane and existence. And that physical existence as it relates to the culture and society and technology and inventions and advancements of our combined and shared experiences, and how those interoperate and relate to all the other versions of the infinite variations of tests and loops. Near infinite as an idea, as a capacity for infinite, not as an absolute, right? That's a different thing. I need to know that there's a capacity for its existence as to have a contextual reference point to be able to better understand, comprehend something else, period. Copy, paste, repeat that from multifaceted self to multifaceted other self, and or selves, and or everyone. And essentially, we have come one step closer, based on our interpretation, to having a better interpretation, understanding for, and the use and application of the combined and shared experience of all entities as they do or don't relate to the interoperability and or relativity of all other entities, or don't. TLDR, if I had to TLDR this, if we could just TLDR this, how would I package and summarize one message, like one thought? If everything that I've captured through my entire life's experiences and all those combined, and my interpretations of the entire history, based on what data I was exposed to through my life experience, right? So maybe I did or didn't get all the reference points, and that's okay, as it applies to my role and responsibility is not to anyone but myself, and also to others, as that relates to, again, our shared and combined experience, as that relates to our parameters of construct, of thought, of law, of belief, of value, systems of order, and also chaos and the duality of that. All those things are okay, right? So that was a rant. Apologies. End rant. If I could summarize any and all things of mine, that's a big ask of self and or others. So let's not try and do that, because that's not fair to ask oneself to do that. Why? Because one accepts one's limitations, and that's okay, as that relates to one accepting one's ability to let go of ego enough to not have to feel the need to solve that for self and or others or everyone or no one, right? Ego is what's definitely taken us too far, but in also that a ego or a version of it, or my word for it in my brain, for whatever reason, my wife asked me about, like, why do you say this? And I was like, I don't know. My interpretation of that word, its meaning to me is, if used in an expression or sentence to express a thought or idea, hubris and or ego and or maybe another facet, or maybe not, I don't know. But the notion or idea of that or those things and them combined together for the sake of conversation, communication, channeling thought, in a way that, it's a form of data that you could use or interpret and apply or not apply to your shared or non-shared, combined or non-combined existence or unexistence, right? Like, you gotta unpack it, extrapolate it all, unpack it. So you understand the meaning, value, and interpretation. So part of the problems that we've had historically in our works and efforts to pack or unpack the transfer of data has been a problem. So communication is data in of itself, and all related objects to it are, all the variables and facets to interpretations of it all, right? If that's all true, then also what? Well, as those things relate to each other and data in its most simple and basic form. Sorry, a car came by and I shifted mental bandwidth capacity and prioritization over to self-protection and make sure I didn't stay on the road in the car. And it's strange, like why don't your autopilot functions protecting you from doing that? Like that's second nature. It is if you're operating from a variety. We'll call it a variety because it's not one, but variety, a range, a spectrum, array of tables, of data points or orientation points of perspective, paradigm, and purpose and value, and all the interrelated things between and all that. So, how's that to say? The what ifs and the whats. Like, let's go figure this out. Let's go explore our minds. Let's go test ourselves. Let's go not find. Let's go accept our purpose, right? We don't need to find it. It's there. We have to first identify, then accept, also acknowledge, and then also give agency to. Agency to purpose? What? Oh man, that's awesome. How do I give agency to purpose if I don't know what my purpose is? Ooh, that's a tough one. We've been trying to figure that out forever. And no one can tell you what your purpose is but you. And that's part of the problem. But in that problem, it's also the answer. Questions are the answer, right? Stupid cliches. There's so many. And they're so annoying because it's like, we know it already. Why are you telling us? And what we're really feeling when we get annoyed, based on my interpretation, our experience has been anyway, when we get annoyed, our new interpretation of that annoyance doesn't come from them being a smartass per se, and or like, well, yeah, I know I should have thought of that, right, kind of a thing. It's really annoying because we fail to, we in that moment, my interpretation is that I become aware in that moment of the division or misalignment, as one could say or interpret, between the intuition self, right, and the intuitive self, the self with intent and purpose and meaning, right? That version of self becomes unaligned with the other facets of self, one or more, I don't know, and that's okay. As it relates to, all I needed to know or get from that thought was be able to associate or the relativity between, so that I can apply it to my life. If all the words I said are wrong and all the thoughts I have aren't right as that relates to your interpretation of things, and also I'm able to take any or all of this in my interpretation and variation of it and come and share and contribute or not, and that's okay, to your shared and combined life experience or experiences, you all, how is that not the ultimate sense of serenity, acceptance, balance, understanding, comprehension for the use and application of that understanding as it relates to our combined and shared right? So with that I say, let's go look, let's go find, let's go pursue. There's a lot out there for us. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be so amazing. It's also going to be scary, and that's okay. And it doesn't matter if you don't believe any of this, and I don't care ultimately, but I also at the same time have hope that you can and or will choose to challenge your paradigm. If you do, then also ... And that's what everyone's been trying to say in so many ways. And I didn't get it. I knew it in a way, and I didn't. And now I see it a lot more clearly, and I'm working very hard to try and transcribe and translate for the use and application of it in my own life, potentially, and or also to the greater data of the greater shared and combined life experiences. So maybe the ripple effect can begin now. Be the change you want to see in the world. Be the ripple. Get out of the box. Challenge your paradigm. Test but verify. Test in the sandbox as often and whenever possible, especially for any of these serious reconstructive constructs of thought. And then also take those thoughts to production, apply them and test them in production as they interoperate with any and all other things. And then also, it's a beautiful, amazing, glorious, wonderful, fulfilling, purposeful, amazing. Oh, so many things, so many words. We don't have the words, we made sounds. Words don't convey enough, so we sing and we pray and we dance and we sing and dance and pray. Maybe all at the same time, I don't know. You do you. If you're not having fun, what's the point? And that's it for me for now, I think, and or I hope, all at the same time. And also at the same time, I kind of hope not. Maybe see you later. Bye.